Welcome. You're listening to The Best of Investing. I'm your host, Edward Brown. Our phone number is 888-912-1190. Use that number to answer the trivia questions for a 5-pack tanning certificate given away during this show. And that certificate's not sponsored by the radio station, but by Tambella Tanning Salon with 2 locations in San Francisco and 1 in Marin. And those certificates are worth about $100, so it's a nice little gift we're giving away. Today, we do have a special guest, Steve Ernest from Fortra Law. The title of this episode of this show is A Litigator's View of Private Lending with the Western Lawman. I love that. A little bio here for Steve. He's a partner and director of litigation and bankruptcy at Fortra, a full-service law firm for the private lending industry. You know what? Let's just get right into it. So you sent me a list of questions, and I'm going to go in a little bit different order because I wanted to kind of give a background here. So, how did you get into the private lending law, and what drew you to litigation and bankruptcy specifically?
So I've represented creditors my entire career, which is amazingly, from my perspective anyway, because I never expected to be an old person, but I guess I am. 30 years now, just approaching 3 decades, but various kinds of lenders, mostly real estate secured, a little bit of personal property. I've done some of that. I once did a replevin on a horse. So it's livestock, real estate, personal property, but mostly real estate.
Is that where the Western Lawman comes in from?
A little bit. You can see the hats behind me. And I came up with that moniker, one, because I'm kind of a dime store cowboy and a wannabe rodeo cowboy.
Okay.
But additionally, I got licensed in several states other than California, and so I thought it made a nice name. But that's the Western Lawman part. But private lending, I like it because of the agility and kind of the fast-paced nature. Yeah. And you don't have a regional or a worldwide bank who's your client, which doesn't have 2 floors of lawyers in New York or Dubai who already know everything and are telling you what to do all the time. You have clients that need your help and take your advice and are receptive to the ideas that you send to them, and it's been really rewarding. I
also, it's not so much bureaucracy. You can get decisions done fairly quickly.
That's right. By necessity, private lending is fast-paced. That's for sure true.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole reason for it. So we have a couple of minutes here before our first break. So tell us about your role as Director of Litigation and Bankruptcy at Fortra. What does a typical day look like?
Yeah, if there is one, you never know what's going to be on the other end of your ringing phone. But we do evictions, we do foreclosure defense. You get a lot of, when people are faced with a foreclosure, which is what our clients are doing, they'll pull out every trick they can. They'll file bankruptcy, they'll try to get restraining orders, they'll seek injunctions, they'll tell you ghost stories about the money that's going to show up from their Uncle Bill in 2 weeks, all kinds of things like that. And so the typical day is giving advice to our clients about sort of what's down the road. Is there a pile of reeds that maybe is a pit with a tiger underneath it, or maybe are they telling the truth? And if the other side is telling the truth, here's how they'll demonstrate it, and here's how you can protect yourself.
It's interesting. I had a situation where I had a loan where this borrower, who was a mortgage broker, commercial mortgage broker, he kept telling me after a couple of months, oh yeah, what, I'm waiting for this big deal to close, and finally I had to say, okay, if it's not here by Tuesday, I'm gonna have to file. And sure enough, the deal closed and he came up with the money. Very interesting. Okay, we got to go to our first commercial break here. Here's our first trivia question, and just a reminder to Steve, if you know the answer, don't say anything quite yet. This one's kind of an easy one, actually. Which U.S. Airways pilot saved lives by landing on the Hudson River? And if you remember, they actually made a movie out of it with Tom Hanks, actually. Okay, call 888-912-1190. The first caller with the correct answer wins that tanning certificate, which, by the way, again, is worth over $100. Want to make a quick mention here for Mountain Mike's Pizza in Santa Fe. Pizza the way it ought to be. I think last time I ordered a pepperoni pizza, I think they put like 100 slices of pepperoni. That's how much I love pepperoni. All right, stay with us. You're listening to The Best of Investing. Don't touch that dial. We are going to be right back. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, along with my special guest, Steve Ernest from Fortra Law. I think Steve knows the answer to this question. Which U.S. Airways pilot saved lives by landing on the Hudson River? Who was that, Steve?
I do know this one. It's not Tom Hanks, but I saw the
No.
movie, and last name is Sullenberger, so it's Captain Sullenberger, and I don't know his first name because they just said his
I
name.
think they nicknamed Sully is what they nicknamed him. I don't remember his first name actually, but Sully Sullenberger. Very good. Do also want to make a mention here for the Transcendence Theater. They have some awesome Broadway shows in Sonoma in their outdoor theater. I always love going to them myself. Got to check them out. transcendencetheater.com to check out the various show dates. All right, so Steve is an attorney with Fortra Law, and let's go on to our next question here. So what are the market trends that you're seeing nowadays with these types of loans, the private lending, and how do these types of lenders get themselves into trouble?
So the market trends lately is becoming more litigious. So we're seeing more complicated bankruptcies, not the easy ones. The easy ones are the 7s, the little bit complicated are the 13s. We see Chapter 11s more than we have in the past and more often. The trends as far as what is in the lawsuit, what's behind it, we're seeing a lot of challenges to loans based on usury. So at least in California, once you apply all of the exceptions to usury, there's not much left to usury, but make sure in your formation of your loan generation process that one of those exceptions is applying to you. Otherwise, your interest rate must be below 10%. If it's anything above that, it's going to be usurious. And if you've got a usurious loan, it isn't as though they take it from 13% down to 10. What they do is they take it down to 0, and they take all the back payments that have been made, apply those entirely to principal, regardless of how you have amortized them, and they'll probably get their attorney's fees, which it's a bad day for you. It's much better to comply with one of the exceptions than to try to figure it out later.
So I remember one of the main exceptions was having a licensed mortgage broker originate, but then weren't there some weird laws going around where if you extended the loan or modified it, you had to have the originating broker? But did they change that? I mean, what's going on with that stuff?
Yeah, that's a really astute observation, Edward. And it was a couple of years ago, there was a case from the California Supreme Court called In Re Moon that said if you have a usurious loan that's subject to one of the exceptions, so you don't have to worry about usury because you had a licensed broker, for example, and that, you point out, is the big one. That's usually how people get around it. As long as you did that, you're fine. You don't have to worry about usury. You can charge them 18% or whatever the interest rate is that you've negotiated and agreed upon. But then balloon payments coming, they want to refinance the loan, and so you work something out. You have a modification or a loan workout, and you don't have an MLO for the modification. This In Re Moon case said, well, then it makes the loan usurious, which we thought was terrible. And the legislature...
In that case, wasn't it just the lender who just modified the loan?
Yeah. It was the lender and the borrower, right? They did it together. This In Re Moon case said you have to have not only a broker, you have to have the same broker intervene. Yeah. Well, what if that guy has moved to Abu Dhabi, or he's retired, or there's all sorts of problems with it, right? Yeah. So the legislature has fixed that, generally speaking, and that's not as much of a problem anymore. But this is good general advice. Get somebody on the horn who knows about these things before you just try to. I have a client from early on in my career who I tell him is famous for trying to save $500. Like, he doesn't call at the front end because, well, he doesn't want to get a bill for that. Yeah. And then at the back end, the problem that he caused himself by saving $500 winds up costing him $500,000. So probably best to call us today. And a lot of times, the price of a phone call, I don't write it down.
Yeah, and so sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. It reminds me back in 1982 when my first job working in an accounting department, there was a guy who knew more tax law. Even he was a banker who got his tax degree, but this guy knew more than any tax attorney. This guy was just brilliant. And I remember walking in on him when he was on a phone call, and he just kind of said, "Yeah, hold on a second," and he's listening for about a minute and 30 seconds to a phone call, and then he just says the word yes, hangs up, and he says, "Okay, I'm billing this guy $500 for that answer."
Yeah.
Well, so hey, sometimes, like you said, $500 can save 500,000, and you know, a lot of times people, it's they don't know what they don't know. That seems to be the biggest problem, right? I mean, it's one thing to be quote an amateur legal expert, but it's another thing when you don't even know what you don't know.
Yeah, private lending is somewhere halfway between getting a loan from your dad to start a lawn care business when you're 12 and getting sophisticated loan instruments from JP Morgan Chase Bank. It's just somewhere in the middle of there, and you don't want to have your loan documents written on the back of a napkin because you might need to enforce it. If everybody pays their obligations the way they're supposed to, you don't have anything to worry about. But there's a percentage of these loans somewhere in the single digits, fortunately, but existing nonetheless. And a lot of private lenders, however large their portfolio is, if they get 6% default, that's significant.
That's pretty significant. Yeah. Tell you what, we're going to go to our second commercial break here. How much shorter is the average woman than the average man? Call 888-912-1190. First caller with correct answer wins that tanning certificate, and we'll give you a little bit of leeway if you're within 6 feet. No, I'm just kidding. All right, that's our trivia question. Stay with us. The best of investing. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back to the best of investing. One more time, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Steve Ernest from Fortro Law. Second trivia question: how much shorter is the average woman than the average man? What do you think, Steve?
I'm going to say 7 inches.
Actually, it's only 4.5. 4.5 inches, yeah. And again, we were going to give some leeway to people if they came somewhat close. I also want to make a mention here also for Action Whitewater Adventures provides the best rafting experience in the North Bay from beginners to more advanced rafters. Check them out at actionwhitewater.com for your rafting trips. All right, let's see what we got here. We had I definitely gonna have to stretch this out over 2 shows because you gave me a lot of good questions to bring here. So, right now, what are you seeing that the biggest legal risks private lenders face in today's market?
Yeah, so the places that private lenders find themselves vulnerable are using outdated documents that have unenforceable provisions. You get these sort of legacy people. Well, I already bought this document set 10 years ago, and I don't want to spend the money on the new ones. It's fast paced enough that things are changing, and you have unenforceable provisions that might not be a problem. It's just you're not going to be able to use them to benefit you. But what if you have an unenforceable provision that kind of pees on or negates some of the ones that you want to use? Well, you're going to want to not use outdated loan documents. So,
yeah, thinking about owner occupied consumer bridge loans. You can't put default interest in there. And maybe years ago, before Section 32 and Reg Z and all that other fun stuff, you used to be able to do stuff like that. So, I mean, I can see that being a big problem.
Yeah, you might be able to dance your way into default interest, but be careful because in California, there's that Honchariu decision that challenges most of those. There might be a navigational.
Well, definitely not on a consumer loan. You can't have that for an owner occupied. But you're talking about for a non-consumer loan, a business loan, basically someone puts up their house, because then I know there's also can you charge default interest and late fees, and then the compounding effect and all that. It always seems to be best to just kind of, if you give more grace to the borrower, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
generally, isn't it?
You're right with Regulation Z and the consumer loans. Those are a very prickly pair for someone who's just kind of writing their own documents or using outdated ones. I would strongly urge people not to do that. Um, their borrowers are sophisticated now. I have a long-term colleague who used to tell me, Steve, borrowers or debtors in bankruptcy are never going to make a mistake to their own detriment. They might forget things, but the things they're going to forget are always things that are going to help you and hurt them. They remember everything that helps them and hurts you.
Yeah.
Fraud, especially since coronavirus, fraud has just been enormous. Wire fraud, stolen identity fraud. Make sure your customer is really your customer and make sure they're really authorized to do the things that they're manifesting to you that they can do. Anything that seems a little funny, like, the day before closing, I'm going to be on vacation, but I've given power of attorney to this guy to sign something. Really, really be cautious about a circumstance like that. You get an email from out of the blue that says, I want the funds wired to this account. You probably won't.
That almost happened. I was supposed to get a payoff on a loan, and the broker called me up and said, we noticed you have a new Chase account, and I said no. And they were ready. They were going to wire money to someone else's Chase account, which I didn't have. But one time, a broker sent me a loan that he wanted me to fund because it was actually fairly close to where I lived, and the borrower had a very odd name. So I Googled him. Turns out this guy was going away for 30 years to life for espionage. And I thought, Steve, what would happen if I would have made that loan? I could just imagine the feds coming in, putting handcuffs on me, even though I'm innocent, and potentially, losing the loan, like as part of some drug deal or whatever. I was thinking I have nothing to do with it. So, yeah, definitely, you got to do some good due diligence on stuff like that. Let's see here. We have about a minute to go. Receivership is getting a lot more attention lately. When should lenders consider using it as a remedy? And let's have you answer part now, and then when we come back, because we're going to have to, I'm sure that it's a longer answer that we're going to be needing on this one.
Yeah, so most security instruments are going to have assignment of rents provisions, which will allow this sort of receivership. So if you've got a duplex or a multiplex or an apartment building, something that's generating its own revenue, a professional building where everyone's paying rent. Well, if you want control without taking title, that's a great way to do it. You get an assignment of rents provision, and all of the people who used to be paying rent to your borrower are now paying their rent to you. Isn't that terrific?
And secondarily, they charge a fortune, don't they?
They can, but it's not your money necessarily that's paying that. It's the borrower's money. And if you want to get your borrower's attention, if you've been playing this phone tag game and they've been telling you lies on the phone for several months or years, if your borrower is no longer getting the rent from their income generating property and you are getting that rent, you will have their full attention. I can assure you
the phone will ring. Yes. Hey, see, I know we're going to get into a little bit more on that. Let's go to our next break here. How much of the world's electricity is generated from nuclear energy? That's our trivia question. 888-912-1190. First caller with the correct answer wins that tanning certificate. Stay with us. The Best of Investing. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. Edward Brown here, along with Steve Ernest from Fortune Law. Third trivia question: how much of the world's electricity is generated from nuclear energy? What do you think, Steve?
So I said in the break, I think it's terrific that you have a nuclear power question where the prize is a tanning certificate, the glowing tan. I'm gonna think it's probably low. I'm gonna go with 5%.
It's not bad at 10%. That's pretty good, though. I mean, that's a pretty good guess. I would have thought most people would have thought, like 25%. No, not bad. I like that.
I wish you were higher, but
okay. Now we're talking about all the sophisticated stuff with, lending and all that. I do have a quick little silly joke of the week, though. Why did the crab cross the road? It didn't. It used the sidewalk.
Oh, because they walk sideways. I
I
get that
walked
one.
sideways. Yeah, you got it. You
Dad
got it.
joke right there.
That is a dad joke. Oh, we got a few more coming at the end. Um, let's see. Did you want to say anything more about the receivership?
Yeah, so receiverships are great if you want to get, like I say, your borrower's attention. You will have it if you are collecting what they perceive as their rents. Those cases are really useful for mismanaged assets, though. If there's stalled construction or situations needing quick intervention, like I say, what sort of my litigation strategy is a lot of times is you just put an abundance of pressure on the other side so that you make it easier for them to do what you want them to do than it is what they want to do. And
And
if you
if you
get a receiver,
So if you have those documents that have the receivership or or the assignments of rents, how do you enforce that? Do you have to go to court, like an emergency court situation?
yeah, so it's a several step process. You can just send a letter that says, "Hi, my name is Edward and I'm the holder of a mortgage on this, and according to the terms of that mortgage, you are required to send your monthly rent to me, so do it at this address and here's the statute." It's a form letter that you can send.
Okay.
Does the renter, the accountant who's in the office space, have to do it? No. How often do they do it? Sometimes. If you get a court order, they're going to have to do it. You serve a court order on them, and if they don't send their rent to you, they do it at their own peril, because if they send it to your borrower and you find out, which you will, they're going to have to pay their rent again and send it to you. And
I would think the first thing they would do is probably call the landlord and say, "Hey, I got this letter. What do I do with it?" And I think they would be scared. Yeah, if I were a tenant and I got served that kind of letter, but probably would call the landlord just to find out what's going on. But then I would think I better at least answer this, because you're right. I don't want to pay twice, because the tenant's the innocent party. Something like that. Okay, all right. So that's is there any time when you don't recommend having a receiver?
well, like you alluded, there's a cost component in this. So at all times in evaluating enforcement of your loans, you're going to have to make a cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Is this a short-term default that's probably likely to be cured? What's my equity position if I foreclose? Am I sitting on a 30/70 loan, that is 30% debt and 70% equity? If that's the case, and I can float this for the 3.5 months it's going to take to foreclose, maybe I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to evaluate, but if it's a circumstance where you've got a performing asset that's being mismanaged and a borrower who's telling you ghost stories about when he's going to pay you or ignoring you, you will get his attention this way.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest parts, is just to get his attention so he doesn't ghost you. Yeah, because I know especially California is so frustrating, because it unfortunately became so borrower friendly that these borrowers, they'll use every trick in the book to not pay. I mean, I've got a few loans where I ended up buying discounted mortgages. There's a loan on that's on the books. They haven't paid since the year 2002. I mean, can you imagine not paying your mortgage for over 20 years? Probably driving around in 3 Cadillacs all at the same time.
I want to find out how that guy did it. I would love to not pay mine.
I know. Yeah, I mean, probably he didn't care about his credit report, but then it got shifted from one lender to another, and they just kind of passed it, just kept passing it. It's crazy. Let's see here. What are some common mistakes lenders make when structuring loans or handling defaults?
So we talked about the outdated forms a little while ago. That's a big one. You try to save $300, use a reputable company, and they're not particularly expensive, but saving a little bit now can cause you problems later. So underestimating a post-default strategy. Where is your leverage? Evaluate that. I'm not getting paid. My borrower is in default. what do I do? Is it a non-judicial foreclosure? Is it a judicial foreclosure? Is it a receivership? There's a lot of sort of spinning plates in evaluating which one you want to avail your.
Sometimes you file both judicial and non-judicial at the same time, right?
Right. So sometimes there are really good reasons to follow both of them contemporaneously, as I like to say. Yes.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, the non-judicial foreclosure, basically, I guess it avoids court. It's faster, but you're limited was the one action rule with the property versus judicial. You're basically saying, I don't care what my collateral is. I'm just suing you, borrower. I don't care where you come up with the money. You got to pay me. But it takes what, a year or so?
The judicial one can, and it can take longer than that, but there's evaluation to make. Like, who are my guarantors? Do they have any money standing behind this? If you do a non-judicial foreclosure, yeah, faster. You're going to get title to the property. But if there's going to be a deficiency and you're going to have to sue your guarantors anyway, well, a judicial remedy, you can put the breach of guarantee in the same case.
Okay, we got to cut to our next break here. No trivia question, but stay with us. We'll be back with some closing comments. Don't touch that. Welcome back to the Best of Investing. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Steve Ernest from Fortra Law. And let's see, where are we going from here? We've got, now, are you seeing more litigation in the private lending space? And if so, what's driving it?
So yes, it's been a bigger year this year than last year, which was a bigger year than the prior year. So it's increasing, and I think it's a facet of borrowers figuring out where the borrowers are becoming more sophisticated. They're finding out where they can push and where their leverage points are. And that suggests to the lenders that there's just a greater need for a legal strategy. There's also more regulation, and I think we can expect that part of it to increase. The legislature is going to put the screws to the banks for sure, and I'm including private lenders in when I say the banks.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, there are a lot of, mom and pop lenders. Very similar to like when people talk about rent control and it's like, the big mean landlords. And a lot of these people are just mom and pops who own a little duplex. And, like when we talked about with, I've mentioned this on the air before with rent control, it's like, if I owned a duplex or fourplex, whatever, and suddenly I'm in this rent control issue, but the first thing I would want to do is go to my utility company and say, rent control, you can't charge me anymore because there's rent control. So you got to, and Mr. Roofer, you can't charge anymore, and the plumber, and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, why is it always hit just the landlord? Very, very unfair. I did want to make a mention here. Pacific Private Money, you want to check them out. They have a fund called the Arrival Fund, where they're making the owner-occupied consumer bridge loans, and then they're selling them off. They're paying 10% right now, and so all of their mortgages are first deeds of trust. And it's funny because people say, well, what's the default rate? Well, so far it's zero because they sell the loans even before the borrowers made the first payment. So it's kind of put it on a little conveyor belt, so to speak. You do have to be an accredited investor. So you want to check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com. Tell them that you heard it on the Best of Investing and ask them about their Arrival Fund. And let's see here. We've got, Steve, how do people get a hold of you if they have questions about lending, bankruptcy, all the great law that you know about?
Yeah, so the firm has a website, and thank you for that. Fortra, Fortralaw, fortralaw.com. All of our contact information is there. I have a YouTube channel where I tell other stories and give advice and review legal movies, all kinds of stuff like that. On YouTube, if you search for Western Lawman, that is me.
Great. And you said you review movies? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, so I tell stories from my legal career. We review current events, the big trials of the day, and I go through movies that are courtroom dramas, things like that, and we evaluate how real or not real they are.
Gotcha. That's very cool. All right. Okay, so now we're getting to our real dad jokes for our thoughts of the day. So my wife threatened to leave me over my obsession with poker, but I think she's bluffing. And I tried to win a tanning competition, just like we talked about, but I only got bronze. All right, audience, tune in next week too. You're shaking your head, Steve. You're supposed to be there we go. We got a little chuckle out of you there. All right, tune in next week to The Best of Investing. We're going to be giving away more free prizes for answering trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best of investing. So long.